In this video we'll be taking a closer look at Caer-Konig, one of the towns in Chapter 1, 10 Towns of Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. We'll also be looking at how you can adjust the difficulty of the quest that can be found in the town, as well as how you can use the quest to tie different stories in Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden better together. This video will start with an overview of the town, then we'll do a little prep list going over each scene that we may want to prepare, and then we'll dive into the details, giving a thorough look at how you can run Caer-Konig in Chapter 1, 10 Towns. Caer-Konig is described as a quiet lakeside town in the eastern part of 10 Towns. The people of Caer-Konig are described as bitter and resentful because after the East Haven ferry is no longer running and the harsh winter has set in, it feels sort of isolated and left behind by the rest of 10 Towns. In addition, Caer-Konig has suffered a string of mysterious break-ins and thefts, which of course is adding to the frustration that the townspeople feel. We're told that Caer-Konig is a semi-friendly but comfortable town with a population of around 150. The leader is Trovus, a retired dragonborn adventurer who has a drinking problem. The militia consists of 25 tribal warriors and 2 veterans. The town sacrifices food to Auril, and its rivals are the other towns around the lake, so that will be Caer-Dineval and East Haven. We get descriptions of 3 locations in Caer-Konig. Those are Hook, Line and Sinker, which is a tavern run by a half-elf who has a business scheme that involves giving away free beer to everyone who comes by. Then we have Frozenfar Expeditions, which is a adventuring shop or mountain gear shop run by 2 scouts, the latter of which, a dwarf, also acts as a mountain guide for people who are intent on visiting Kelvin's cairn. Finally, we also have the Northern Light, which is an inn run by the Chorad sisters, which are 2 youngish human sisters who bicker a lot amongst themselves and who has had their lantern, color-changing lantern, stolen by the Duergar, although they of course don't know that yet, which is where we have the adventure in the town starting, or the quest in the town starting. So moving on to that, the quest, The Unseen, revolves around invisible Duergar going around town stealing stuff from the inhabitants. These Duergars are ostensibly after Charterland, which they can bring back to Sardorak's fortress to build this dragon that will destroy 10 Towns, but it seems like they're interested in taking mostly anything, since they have taken the lantern, they have taken some goats and so on. The quest starts when the characters are approached, you could say, or surprised by Trovus, this dragonborn speaker who has a drinking problem, who pulls them into the quest, leads them to the Chorad sisters. From there they can then get to the hideout, where they can battle Duergar. Amongst these Duergar are one of Sardorak's sons, who has in his possession some letters and information that will then lead the characters to East Haven, where of course they can meet more Duergar and finally find a map that will lead them to Sardorak's fortress in the mountains. Overall, I consider Caer-Konig to be one of the most important towns in 10 Towns, because this is where the Duergar plotline really starts, or at least where it starts best. Okay, so what I want to do next is make a little prep list. This is simply a short bullet form list of the scenes that I would want to prepare or have prepared if I was running Caer-Konig for my players. As the characters arrive in town, I describe the central locations to them, so that'll be the Hook, Line and Sinker, the Frozenfar Expeditions and the Northern Light. Since Caer-Konig is a very small town, we can assume that these are really the only locations the characters will visit. This of course means that I'll prepare a scene for each of these locations, so that's the Hook, Line and Sinker, Frozenfar Expeditions, and the Northern Light. If the characters are still chasing after Sefikhaltro and Torque's caravan in the Cold-Hearted Killer quest, I may also want to have them run into Sefikhaltro and Torque's caravan in Caer-Konig. That sort of depends on the timeline and how things are playing out, so I won't go too much into depth with how that would look. I've covered the quest as a whole in another video, but just remember that if the characters are chasing after them, now is probably a good time to have them meet them, especially because we don't want them to zoom past what's going on in Caer-Konig, because we actually want them to get this, the Unseen quest. Finally, of course, there's the scene where Trovus sort of meet the characters, which I think is a good scene, so I'll have prepped that as well. This leads to the Northern Light if the characters haven't been there already, and from there on it's of course the Duergar hideout, which takes up the rest of the gameplay in Caer-Konig. Okay, so having a prep list, a list of scenes that I'll want to run in Caer-Konig, I'll now go down, just add in a bit of details, a bit of commentary about how I would maybe run things or change things around. For the Hook, Line and Sinker, this is a pretty straightforward place to run, I think. I think it's a fun little gimmick that the owner of the tavern is giving out free beers to anyone who comes by, trying to get them in. He seems like a good fellow, and although the adventure describes, or the description of Caer-Konig tells us that the town is very distrustful and angry and resentful towards the rest of 10 towns, this anger isn't really to be found in the descriptions of the location. So you could maybe insert a bit of that here. So when the characters come into the hook, line, and sinker, they're met by this friendly, but maybe also a bit haggard or a bit desperate tavern keeper who has been down on his luck a bit. Maybe business is dwindling, or it's hard to get supplies, and the beer tastes a bit bad because the meat they usually get from across 10 towns isn't coming in at the same pace. This is of course a good place to put in a hook for good meat, saying that okay, we haven't gotten any shipments for weeks now, there must be something going on in good meat. You could also have the patrons of the tavern, let's say a raggedy bunch of fishers and mountain trappers and hunters who are sitting around tables, feeling down, maybe grumbling about how there's no help to come from Caer-Konig. We can't even get a meeting with the speaker, I heard, which sort of also foreshadows what's going on in Caer-Konig, and other stuff like that. So playing up the resentment a bit. It's a good place to put in some rumors. Just be aware that you don't want the characters to run away from town before they've actually investigated the unseen. So of course, if the characters decide to visit hook, line, and sinker first, this is also where you'll maybe spread a few rumors about that, having some of the patrons grumble about the goats that went missing, or the Northern Lights lantern no longer spreading just a little bit of joy in town. Moving on, Frozenfar Expeditions is again rather straightforward. If the characters are coming here while doing a mountain climb quest from Targus, they'll probably visit here to find out that the adventurers the guide they're after is at Kelvin's Cairn. But if not, this is just sort of a place they can pick up some supplies, maybe get some sled dogs and whatnot. I don't think there's too much you want to maybe build in here, but of course you can. It's 2 guides, so they'll know a lot about the area if the characters are looking for someone or something. That takes us of course to the Northern Light, which is well described in the book because it's also where the quest starts. I think the scene that we get here in the book, which sort of sets off the unseen quest, is pretty well described. I like the interactions between the 2 innkeepers, and if the characters visit the Northern Light before they get the quest, I'll really make sure to play up this bickering between them, maybe have them scowl at dwarven characters if there's any in the party, sort of playing up this feud that is going on between them and how they are distrustful of dwarven characters because they've had their stuff stolen. You can also choose to cut Truvus out of the quest hook if the characters start inquiring on their own, because he's not really needed to deliver the quest, it's just a fun way to do it. That brings us to the quest, The Unseen. I like the way this is described in the book. I think it's a fun scene where you have Truvus coming out of a bank of snow, hung over from the night before because he was looking for the thieves but ended up drinking too much and falling unconscious. I think it's a really humorous setup that you can really use at any point the characters are going through town, which of course just makes it extra convenient. If there's one thing I'd change about this, it's that I would want him to give a reward. I don't like quests that hinge on the characters just doing it out of their altruism or their own good will. You want the characters to be motivated, both if they're good persons or good people, and if they're greedy people who are mostly in it for themselves. So you could do this by having Truvus offer up a relic from his adventuring days. I have a suggestion in our DM's resources that is a breastplate of warning against dragons. This will be pretty fun when they actually meet dragons later in the adventure, but it could really be any helpful adventuring equipment that a Dragonborn adventurer might have picked up. So it could be a +1 sword or a sword of vengeance or what have you. Anything that you think the characters will want, you can have Truvus sort of promise to the characters, maybe specifically to one of the characters that he feels he connects with, who maybe gets his vibe and wants to listen to him brag about the old days, and maybe seems like a younger version of himself. I see Truvus as sort of this aging but still mired in his youth Dragonborn who likes to linger on what's gone on in the past and maybe want to pass that torch on to the younger adventurers, give a bit of advice that is maybe not the best advice and maybe isn't entirely wanted. So offering remarks like, oh, I'd be careful about that, and oh, don't get too hasty, you may want to take it careful there, buddy, and stuff like that. Maybe he'll compare some of the adventures to his adventuring companions from back in the day, saying how you remind me of, insert the name of an elven wizard he adventured with back in the day, and so on. We then get to the inn where there's the sisters, and the characters can find out about the tracks and go investigate. There's this sort of fun interaction between the sisters. You can play up a bit, really emphasizing how they're bigger amongst themselves and how one of them is maybe a bit xenophobic against dwarves and so on. There's not too much I would add to that, but I would change how the tracks are described, because I don't feel that finding the tracks but then being told that, oh, you can't follow them now, and then there's a new set of tracks the day after, really makes a lot of sense. I'd either just have tracks be there the characters can immediately follow, or I'll not have tracks be there but tracks showing up the next day. Making it difficult without any way to sort of overcome it and without any real reason for delaying it, as far as I can tell, isn't really helpful. Simply let them find the tracks so they can get to the Duergar hideout. Doesn't have to be more difficult than that. Next up, we have the character's arrival at the Duergar outpost, and I think it's a cool, fun little location. If there's one issue with it, it's that it's really hard to visualize it. That's an issue we had at the table when running it, where the players wouldn't be able to sort of picture it in their head because of it's just complicated, and the descriptions aren't always the easiest to maybe visualize it for the players. For that reason, I think it's very helpful to have cut out a map or where you can show what's outside, not showing, of course, the rooms and the interior of the hideout, but sort of being able to show what the characters would be able to see as they approach the hideout. As for the hideout itself, there's not too much I change here. I think it's a good location. It's reasonably well described. The characters should be able to, with the explanations in the book, get in either here or there, where they'll encounter eventually, of course, some of the Duergar, which they'll then have to do battle with. Be aware that you may want to sort of pull your punches a bit, so test the characters out when they sort of run into the first Duergar, have another Duergar or two show up on the next round, see how that goes, especially if the characters are around 2nd or 3rd level. And if the characters are having a really easy time, you can always just throw in another Duergar here or another Duergar there. But if they're having a difficult time, maybe pull back, don't give them all the Duergar at once, but have them encounter them piecemeal. As for Nilda, it's described in the book how he has this trap where he can sort of divide the party and that he might try to escape. But since the location is putting him at a dead end, he can't really escape. Even if invisible, it'll be really difficult for him to get past the party and away. So if you want to improve his chances of escaping, you can have him have a secret passage that leads back to 08, the Duergar's quarters, where he can sort of slip through, but still, of course, leaving behind the evidence that is in his office. And that brings us to the other point, which is the Duergar plotline, the whole Sardarok and his dragon trying to destroy 10 towns. This is where we want the characters to learn about that. So the book has him describing how his father will destroy all of 10 towns and saying these things. And there's the letter, which of course also indicates that his brother is in Easthaven and so on. But you don't want to give the characters too much information at this point, because we don't want them to just breeze past Easthaven and Candinaville and the rest of 10 towns and head straight for the mountains. And if the characters can capture Duergar, and Duergar knew where the fortress is, they would of course be able to just do that, which would be bad for the adventure because they'll be missing a lot of stuff, and also pretty bad for them since Sardarok Fortress is a very difficult encounter location even for 5th level characters, which is probably where we want them to be when they get there. So there's of course a few ways you can resolve this issue. One is simply that the Duergar don't know where it is. They're used to navigating underground. They were led here by someone who knew the way, perhaps the brother who's in Easthaven. So they don't know how to get back to Sardarok Fortress. They'll be able to tell them, yeah, the fortress is in some mountains somewhere. It's probably a few days from here, but we have no idea how to get there, even if they could be magically coerced or interrogated and so on. While the Duergar hideout, of course, in itself does a lot to foreshadow, especially the Duergar plotline, of course, where there's actually ways we can add in some more foreshadowing. As I've described in previous videos, I think it could be a good idea to weave some of the storylines closer together. In this case, having the Frost Druids be allies with the Duergar is a way where we can sort of foreshadow the Frost Druids when the characters find the Duergar and vice versa. So if you're running with that idea, you could have any Duergar the characters find and interrogate. Say that there's frost druids or frost druid animals or awakened plants and stuff that's coming by the hideout from time to time, delivering charterlin, and that one such shipment from maybe up north or out west if you want the characters to head to Easthaven if they haven't already been there, and that one of these shipments was expected in the coming days. So this is one way where we can really sort of tie the plotlines together so the characters will go, okay, so how does this connect and why are they delivering charterlin and what is this charterlin used for? Which of course they'll learn is going to be used to build this dragon to destroy 10 towns. You could also hint at this alliance by having Nildar have a note to himself on his desk where he's written something like Tiefling Wizard in Caer-Konig, Arcane Brotherhood, ? Tell the Druid's Beast, or simply tell Vernus, so the characters can see that, okay, the Duergar may be keeping tabs on something called the Arcane Brotherhood if they don't know about it already, and that there's a Tiefling Wizard in Caer-Konig. These sort of questions will tie the storylines closer together and also awaken the sense of we're unraveling a mystery. There's a web of stuff connected here that the characters can then pick up on, perhaps urging them to investigate in Caer-Konig instead of breezing through the town straight for Easthaven if you want to have them spend some more time in Caer-Konig. As for the difficulty of the Duergar hideout, it really depends on how you run it. Because as written, the characters may be able to just go in and take out a Duergar here, then a Duergar here, then a Duergar there, and then get to Nildar, and in the end that's a string of smaller encounters that won't really challenge them if they're around 3rd level, as I'll assume that they are. On the other hand, if you played in a way where all the Duergar encounter the characters at the same time, we're dealing with a very difficult encounter. The way that I think it runs most fun and most enjoyable is if you can have the central encounter, the most difficult encounter, take place around Nildar at 05 and 06. So that'll be the characters are investigating, maybe they've run into a Duergar or 2 before, but they haven't really encountered the full force of the hideout. So they come up to 05 where Nildar is ready to split the party in 2 using the trap we get described here, and as the party is then split, 2 other Duergar pops out of invisibility behind the characters on the eastern side of this fence, while Nildar goes to town on the 2 characters on the western side of the fence, or something along those lines. That makes for a dramatic encounter with some tactical challenges as the characters are split up and can't really help each other, and it also makes it easier to facilitate an escape of Nildar if you want that to happen, to maybe have him show up later in Easthaven or Caer-Konig. If you want to make the hideout more accessible for lower level characters, this is as simple as halving all Duergar hit points perhaps, or pulling out a Duergar 2 in each location, because a single Duergar, even at full hit points and with the ability to turn large, is a medium to hard difficult challenge for a party of 1st level adventurers, and becomes sort of a moderate and not too difficult challenge as soon as we get to 2nd or 3rd level. The Ogre Zombie that is in 02 is also something you can maybe use to your advantage if you're adjusting difficulty on the fly, having it perform really poorly in combat, maybe even attacking Duergar if it's not too smart and simply lashes out at anything that comes close to it. So this is a way you can dial down the difficulty maybe if you've already committed to a certain number of Duergar and it wouldn't make sense for them to pull back. Alright, so that wraps up this video on running Caer-Konig and how you can make it easier for yourself and perhaps throw a bit of extra foreshadowing in there. So if you like what you see here and you want to follow along with this, you know where the buttons are, and you can go sign up, leave a like, it really helps out. I love your comments, reading what could be better and what did you like or did you appreciate the video. Any comments, feedback or criticism is always very, very welcome. I'd also like to thank our patrons over at patreon.com/eventyr, in particular Todd GRX, who is our newest legend patron and who has actually been following along with what we're doing with Rime and Frostmaiden for a while. So thank you, Todd, I really appreciate the support. Alright, so that wraps it up. There's no more for me. There'll be more videos on Rime and Frostmaiden, of course. I'll be skipping over some of the last towns, but I will cover Easthaven, that much is for certain. If there's a town you would really want me to cover of the ones that I haven't already, please sound off in the comments below, because that sort of helps me pick if I should do many of them or which one I should do. Beyond that, there's nothing more to say than thank you for watching, and I hope I see you in the next one.